some of the people. And a lot of people don't realize that there was a time when chiropractic was illegal, by the way, when it was considered the practice of medicine, and chiropractors were jailed for practicing medicine without a license. And the first one to be so jailed was none other than the founder, D.D. himself. And just to give you a little vignette into the character of that man, here is an excerpt from an interview. Well, this guy's serving time. What do you think he said when the reporter asked him, well, you know, what's jail-like life? He said, only one thing I would like to do, which they will not allow me, and that is to hang out my sign over the window of my cell. That's Dr. Herbert Ross Reaver, the most jailed chiropractor in history, who did time in the state of Ohio over and over and over, because, and this is very interesting, in those days, chiropractic was regulated by the Board of Medical Examiners, and he could have obtained a permit to practice a limited branch of medicine. He could have had one of those. A lot of chiropractors went for it. He and his colleagues did not. Here's a chiropractor who's actually permitted to continue practicing in the jail, which is pretty cool, because the powers that be knew him. But jail time was not always a pleasant experience, and some of the sentences were downright draconian. Listen to this. In 1923, B.F. Lear and W.E. Courtier were fined $500 or 833 days in jail, and they chose jail. You do the math, folks. That's over 2 years of being away from your family, your friends, your loved ones. What were these jails like? Here's a letter that a doctor wrote home. We see an occasional rat, but all the bugs apparently were killed last summer. I could stand some springs or a mattress on the bars I sleep on, but outside of this and the disagreeable dispositions of some of the prisoners, I'm getting along nicely. And as you can see, women were locked up as well as men. Here's what Dr. Reaver wrote. It's a matter of principle for us. We don't practice medicine in any shape or form. To be designated as limited medical practitioners was something intolerable to us. And of course it was a useless thing anyway, because the so-called limited permit limited the types of cases we could handle. It was something that any chiropractor with guts could not accept. And indeed, some paid the ultimate price. Here's an obituary. Dr. Albert Ivnick, chiropractor of Cleveland, Ohio, died yesterday at 7 p.m. He never recovered from the effects of exposure at the Warrensville workhouse and finally passed away last night, leaving his wife and 4 children. I believe it was Dr. Tarantino who said today's chiropractors were born on third base, but that they hit the triple. We don't have to die for chiropractic, folks, but I suggest that you consider committing your life to freeing life in others. Because when you do, look what will happen. We're not in jail today because of patients. Patients who understood chiropractic, patients who demanded the ability to have their subluxations analyzed and corrected. But the battle continues because, as the other Weird Al said, great spirits have always often encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds. And it all goes back to philosophy, the rational foundation. And the speakers before me did a wonderful job of bringing forth some of the philosophical issues in your life that you must define, because if you take the time to define your core values, if you take the time to define what it is your life is about, if you take the time to decide what is it that you would be willing to die for, to give your life for, it becomes very easy then to follow a moral compass. Because when you know what you're about and you know what your values are, all you have to do when you're confronted with a decision is ask yourself, is this or is this not going to advance my core values? Is this or is this not? going to enhance my ability to serve humanity? And some things, the answer will be yes, and some it will be no, and some it really doesn't matter. But it makes living life a much easier situation. I was at the UN at a health committee meeting, and we're all there with our highfalutin degrees. I was the only chiropractor, but there were MDs and PhDs and so forth on this committee. And we were being addressed by a Native American woman who was talking about indigenous healing. And everyone said, what's this woman possibly got to offer us, with our highfalutin educated minds? And what she said was so simple and so elegant. She said, whenever our children are confronted with a significant life decision, we ask them to consider the impact of that decision on 7 generations. And folks, what we're going to see, and this is really heady stuff, is that the lifestyle choices that people make are actually transmitted to future generations. And one of those lifestyle choices is to live a life without nerve interference. And I'm often interested by some of the folks on the other side of the